Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Why No One Plays. It's a series where I like to discuss champions in League of Legends that rarely see much play, if any, in both the pro scene and solo queue nowadays. And for this episode, let us talk about everyone's favorite, potentially not safe for work fanfiction inciting champion, Illaoi. I was actually going to make my next episode on Kog'Maw, but since there's a new patch and old replays become obsolete, for whatever reason, quite literally no one plays Kog'Maw that I can get replays from, so I'll do Illaoi first because she's played just a little bit more. Now, let's get the obligatory disclaimer out of the way before anything else. This series is not meant to bash Illaoi and say she's a bad champion, nor discourage anyone from playing her, and for everyone who does play and or main Illaoi, please do not take this video as me hating on the champion. The purpose behind Why No One Plays is to create discussion over possible reasons as to why certain champions don't see as loyal or as wide of a following as others. So when Illaoi was introduced, she was met with pretty divisive sentiments. There was one section of the player base that found her to be pretty chill and not too scary, and then another section that vehemently disliked how she could turn into a 1v5 death machine. Overall though, I'd wager she's not exactly the most beloved champion in the game. She's not Akali or Riven levels of hated, but most people that fight her, they generally don't think she's a very fun champion to go against at the very least. I have my own personal bias on the champion, but I don't think it's a good idea to bring that in given I'm a top main, so I'll try to keep this as objective as possible. Illaoi embodies the role of a juggernaut to the literal T. She's extremely slow in both movement and attacks, but if she can get close enough to enemy champions, there's almost no one who can match her in sheer force, even among her own peers. Where she differs from the likes of Darius, Garen, Set, and the like is while they're more aggro tank juggernauts, Illaoi is a control juggernaut. Control? It's an element of gameplay that more commonly associates with mages or supports, for example Anivia, Azir, Zyra, Orianna, so on and so forth. These champions are designed to establish territorial pressure and enable their teammates more freedom to move around while simultaneously deterring the enemy team. Well, Illaoi is the only juggernaut in the game who has that same purpose. Not a single other champion has the same area pressure that she does. Trundle is kind of defined as one of them, with his E and W, yes, but he's less of a control fighter and more of a 1v1 duelist. This is where her central design problem comes into play. While other control champions have the ability to establish said control anywhere in the map at any time, Illaoi doesn't have that luxury, at least not to the same extent. All four of her activated abilities tie in with her passive, Prophet of an Elder God. The way she plays is that she periodically spawns tentacles nearby that can aid her in battle by attacking alongside her when specifically procced. Each tentacle can do a lot of damage, almost as much as if she was hitting you with a critical strike. Her Q Tentacle Smash acts as an on-demand tentacle smash, with the same properties as the tentacles that spawn from her passive. Harsh Lesson, her W, it's an empowered basic attack with higher range, does quite a bit of damage and has any nearby tentacles to strike at the area she recently hit. So this is her first interaction with her passive, and it's a pretty decent one. It does allow her to gain some semblance of control over her tentacles at a time and place where she would need them. Test of Spirit, her E, is the most controversial ability she has. Illaoi throws a ghost tentacle that sort of yanks the soul of a champion and creates like this voodoo doll where any damage dealt to that dummy is then transmitted to the real champion just at a reduced amount. And if the dummy is either killed or if the real champion breaks the tether range, they get infected with the curse that spawns nearby tentacles as if they were Illaoi, but the tentacles then autonomously slam towards you. I have a lot of problems with this ability that I'll get to after I cover her ultimate, which is Leap of Faith. It causes her to jump into the air and slam into the ground, spawning tentacles for every enemy champion hit, and those tentacles become untargetable, attack twice as fast, and she gets to use her W more frequently. This ability is the be-all end-all of her performance in a team fight. If she lands a perfect ultimate, it's almost a guaranteed win for her team, but that creates another problem in and of itself. So this gives the impression that Illaoi herself is not the damage source, but rather some other element, just like Azir attacks via his soldiers, and Orianna attacks with her ball. Only difference is that Illaoi cannot willingly change the position of these tentacles, nor have them attack on her own command. More importantly, her damage source is completely rooted in place. So there are three major problems with Illaoi that ruin her popularity among those who don't actively main her. First one is that she takes the whole slow but powerful, I think, a little too far. Part of the reason why tanks and juggernauts are not nearly as fun to pick up as assassins and divers is because they feel inherently more sluggish to play. It's like you're forced to carry a weight on your shoulders the entire game just in exchange for being bigger and meaner. Yes, there are some heavyweights that can be pretty fluid to play, but almost all of the others generally feel a lot more stiff to execute with, like for example Aatrox, Urgot, Scion, or Ornn. Illaoi is no stranger to that. A lot of her abilities have very long cast times, and the tentacles themselves are slow to attack and can be easily sidestepped outside of being empowered by her ultimate. Her Q takes 3/4 of a second to use. She has the second lowest base attack speed in the game, if not for Graves, who kind of is the exception because he needs the reduced attack speed since he shoots multiple bullets per hit, which then in fact makes Illaoi the slowest attacking champion in the game. W, it's a really slow auto attack reset with a short distance jump. It seems to take a lot longer than it should, and E has a long cast time to pull out the enemy spirit. Lastly, her ultimate roots are in place. She can't move around with it unlike the new Volibear ultimate or like Set's ult. She feels very heavy to play. I mean, I don't know how much her little tentacle idol weighs, but out of every juggernaut in the game, Illaoi spends the longest time casting her abilities. Even for someone like Aatrox, who some people feel is a slower and clunkier version of Riven, he still gets to move around quite fluidly due to, higher base movement speed and his dashes. Illaoi doesn't really get any of that. This is necessary because when compared to her peers, she also probably has the overall highest potential damage output by leaps and bounds, perhaps even more than a Nasus with like 1000 stacks or a constantly 5-stack Darius. So while from a balance standpoint, she needs to be this slow, given the fact that she can destroy everyone in her face, it doesn't feel very good to play. There needs to be a balance between ease of usability and power. In her case, I think it was pushed a little too far. Newer juggernauts like Set, Mordekaiser reworked, Volibear reworked, even Urgot reworked have really strong power, but they're not nearly as sluggish. Problem number 2 is that Illaoi lacks dynamic interaction with her tentacles. This is what sets her apart from other control fighters like Orianna, Zyra, and Azir, whose external elements contribute more to a fight than the actual champion does. If we compare Illaoi to Zyra, since they both have a passive that kind of functions in the same way, Zyra has way more control over her plants than Illaoi does on her tentacles, because Illaoi lacks the ability to spawn tentacles around her at will outside of her ultimate. Even then, she needs to strike an enemy champion to do so. Granted, tentacles do way more damage than a single plant, but the point is there's no convenient way for Illaoi to pick up a tentacle real quick. Zyra, on the other hand, she gets to spawn a seed at will with her W, so if a fight breaks out and she doesn't have any nearby seeds, she can just drop a couple real quick. But with Illaoi, the only thing you can do is just pray you have a tentacle nearby, or your ultimate has to be ready. Even then, it's really difficult without flash to land your ultimate on more than 2 targets, I think. Heimerdinger, another example, who needs to load up on his turrets, he can easily drop a grenade, pop his ultimate or even his regular turrets, and then blast you to bits. But Illaoi loses more than half of her damage uptime if you just fight her when there are no tentacles nearby. Since by nature, League of Legends is a game that actively rewards players who move around the map a lot as often as possible, and punishes players who sit in lane all day and do nothing else, I'm looking at you 80 carries, Illaoi rarely has the opportunity to set up her tentacles. Even if she does get a really good ultimate on your team, everyone can just run away from you. It's not like the tentacles can chase you through the jungle or anywhere else. Of all the champions that have external sources of damage, Illaoi's is the most inconsistent. Azir, he has direct control over his sand soldiers, right? Orianna as well for the ball. Zyra, Shaco, and Heimerdinger's summons, their plants, boxes, and turrets. They autonomously attack any nearby targets, so you don't even need to directly interface with them. I get that some may argue that is part of the skill expression in her kit, micromanaging her tentacles and landing solid ultimates. But the way it's played lacks consistency and, more importantly, player agency. Outside of laning phase, where you're constantly spawning tentacles nearby, it is really difficult to set up, especially since they despawn if you go too far away from them, so she can't plan ahead of time and create a death trap at a choke point like a Jhin or Teemo can with their plants and mushrooms. Lastly, I have a very big problem with her E. Illaoi's whole personality revolves around her commanding tentacles and using her brute strength to clap some cheeks. So why does most of her playstyle center around sniping you from a distance and harassing you from the safety of her own tentacles? Before, you could take the risk of trying to fight for your spirit back, but they removed that part, so practically the only option enemy players have is to run and break the tether, which then makes them spend about 10 seconds trying to dodge tentacles and then pick them apart. Where is the kick names take ass part of Illaoi that is so exemplified by her words and personality? This is more egregious in lane when 90% of the time she waits for her E to come out of cooldown and pokes you down before going in for a dive, a lot of which goes unpunished. Other meatheads like Garen, Darius, and Volibear, they actively put themselves in harm's way meaning that you can trade back towards them to get their damage in. Illaoi, on the other hand, hangs back at a distance and pokes you from afar most of the time. This ability single-handedly kills any enjoyable interaction between Illaoi and whoever she's fighting, for both players. She's a tentacle priestess. Why does the only aspect of her tentacles involve smashing you to bits? Why is there no ability to like throw tentacles out to grab a champion and pull them in, or keep them stuck in place, or just you can do so many things with tentacles, and no, not in the way you guys are thinking. It's just a really sad missed opportunity, I think, on Riot's part, because there's so many other interactions you could have done with her tentacles besides slapping people around. Maybe using tentacles to block an area or some kind of hook, right? That's kind of what you would expect from a giant kraken. The current test of spirit is nothing but just, oh wow, I got tagged by her E now, so I have to run away from lane for 15 seconds. It's just such a turn-off of an ability. Sure, it allows you to spawn more tentacles that can attack the player, but that's just more the players running away from you, and they're just random tentacles spawning around that attack them. Not so much you contributed to that, it's more just, nothing about Illaoi's E feels like it's really high skill intensive, because the only skill of that ability is just landing the skill shot. The tentacles that spawn and randomly attack the person infected with the vessel, it's kind of out of place. Now, I understand you can use Test of Spirits really heavy slow to catch up towards fleeing enemies, but there are two rebuttals to that. Her E has such a long cast time and a short range to begin with, so it's counterproductive and very risky to use it anyway. Number 2, you can design that in so many other ways. Juggernauts as a whole lack any dashing spell, but that doesn't mean they don't have some way of closing the gap. Darius, he has a pull. Garen removes slows and gains movement speed. Volibear gains move speed when running towards enemies. Trundle has a slowing pillar and his W that can make him go faster and impede enemies. Set is both increased move speed towards enemies and a pull, but all Illaoi gets is something that turns her into a ranged champion for like 7 seconds. You literally have no other way to catch up to someone as Illaoi even with your E, so all players have to do is either play some ranged harasser who can fight her from afar, or just avoid fighting her altogether. All of her design problems force a very rigid, stale, and unengaging interaction for both the person who plays her and the person playing against her. Mind you, it is satisfying landing a flash ultimate on 5 people and smashing everyone to bits by herself, but like I mentioned with Udyr, that's only 1% of her gameplay. She doesn't feel like a dangerous bruiser or a really annoying lane bully in laning phase. She feels more like a Teemo, Quinn, or Gnar than a Darius or Garen sometimes, and in teamfights you can either be really dangerous or really useless. Consistency is important with a champion, I can't stress that enough. That's why other bruisers are played more frequently, because all power is within their agency, their demand, and their control. Illaoi is too circumstantial to be effective and overall doesn't feel fun to play because of how sluggish her movements and abilities are, along with how players don't have very much control over her tentacles outside of her W. Apart from her clunky animations, I think her Q, W, and ultimate are decently fine. A rework is definitely needed for her E. It is a very hated ability by a large portion of the community because of how unfun it is to play against, and there are just so many other tentacle-themed attacks you can add to her kit, besides just smashing people. When I look at Illaoi, I don't really get the vibe that she's a priestess who commands a kraken god or whatever. She feels more like a person swinging around a hammer made of octopus. With that said, I believe there's a lot of things Riot can do to make her more fun to play and play against if we just give her a mini rework. For example, Zack's Q change where you can slam 2 things together, it's so much better than his old Q, which was just a slimy punch. Something like that for Illaoi could work wonders. I believe she has a really interesting concept that can be enjoyed outside of Rule 34 fan art, but right now, she is arguably the least played juggernaut in the game, or at least the most disliked one to play and play against. So, hope you guys enjoyed this take on why no one plays Illaoi. I played her quite a bit myself over the years, and while she is definitely powerful, I would just, much rather play Darius, who can still accomplish the same 1v5 pentakill, just with more consistency and less contingency. All the same, I would love to hear your thoughts about Illaoi in the comments section below, especially for those who main her, because I do know there are actually quite a few Illaoi one-tricks out there. I just want to remind you that I don't have any personal beef against Illaoi, nor am I trying to bash on her and her player base. It is just to encourage discussion and to bring to light on why player sentiment on her as a whole may not be as welcoming, so please let me know what you guys think. If you did find this video entertaining, a rating would be much appreciated, and you're welcome to offer suggestions on what champions to cover next as well. And if you want to see more videos like this, there's a playlist that shows all of the Why No One Plays videos in the description below. Apart from that, I look forward to seeing you again soon in the next video. Take care.